All right, in this episode, we talk about labrum tears.
And we break down one of Coach Logan's pitchers.
All right, Brent Porcia and Stephen Godani here at the Top Velocity hashtag Pitch Tips Show, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat at Top Velocity, hashtag Pitch Tips, hashtag Baseball Tips. Ask your question, we answer on the show. A little shout out to David Ardsma up in Buffalo. He's been he's hijacked our Snapchat account. So for fun, if you want to check out our story, he's been putting up some cool stuff. If you got a request for him, go to TheDA53 at Twitter. Put up a request. I don't know. You want to see what it's like on in the bullpen or in the dugout.
If you want to bet him who's going to win Warriors Spurs in the playoffs, I'm already in on that one.
There you go. Tell him to keep us up to date on Snapchat. Go ahead and do it, man. So let's talk about the Pocket Radar. We get a cool discount, so I want to tell you about it. So it's $2.99, but you get 10% off of that if you go to pocketradar.com and put in the coupon code TOPVELO. Give you 10% off. You know, why I like the Pocket Radar is because, you know, someone came on the comments and said, here's a study that said it wasn't reliable, and that is actually linking through Stalker Radar. I like stalkers. I just, you know, how biased is that? A lot of stuff out there when you got different camps talking about different things. I'll be honest with you, I've put it up with Jug, Stalker, and there's different readings coming of all of them, but it's typically in the mix of all the different readings. So I'm just being honest.
Yeah,
I completely agree. So what's the difference between those? Is those are kind of clunky. They're harder to charge. This one just comes with batteries. I can just pop in new batteries and go. This one gets a big convenience factor with all of this. And so it typically hangs around more because it's more convenient. It's in my pocket as opposed to being laid down somewhere. It's cheaper, not worried about someone stepping on it and breaking it and be all flustered that someone broke my $500 gun or $600 gun. Okay, so $2.99 and you'll get 10% off. And the reason it's big is we use it to record velos as we're going through our drills. It gives us an idea of where we are, and I recommend that with the 3X programs that you use this to record drills, let those target throws, just to know where you are. Don't go off feeling, because feelings can leave you incorrect. You know, I don't want to guess, I want to test. So, Pocket Radar, top velo. All right, what's our question for today? Brendan Donahue asks, any tips for someone who has previously experienced a torn labrum, arm slot? Unfortunately, this season has started. We're in injury country. Already heard about a lot of injuries coming from different places. So labrum injuries. Labrum is going to be more tied to. Well, there's two things I'm gonna be concerned about a labrum injury. I'm gonna be concerned about biomechanics, obviously. So you asked arm path, we'll go in that. But first, let's talk about mobility. Okay. If I see a guy I had a guy come to last camp, 30 degrees of internal rotation. So if you're hitting 30 degrees, so if you're standing here and your arm's out and you go down and you only see 30s about here, and that's all it goes. So if I don't get my trunk out and I'm in maximum external rotation and that arm pops into internal, I've already hit 30 right there. So if I'm throwing hard, boom, it's gonna hit into range. Where's it gonna go? It's gonna wanna pull the scap out. You know, and if your traps are weak, if your serratus is weak, it's gonna pull it out. It's gonna go right in the labrum. It's gonna tear the labrum. You're gonna slap tear. Okay, so I wanna make sure we've got 50 degrees of internal rotation. I wanna make sure I have good trap strength. I have good upper trap, lower trap strength. Serratus strength, so strong trap, strong serratus. Then I'll know it's protected. So 50, at least 50, strong trap, strong serratus, you know, strong rhomboids even. Then I'll be confident I'm not gonna have another labrum tear. Okay, so to me, a labrum tear, first look at your back strength and look at your range of motion. Now, how do we get more internal rotation range of motion? I don't believe in sleeper stretching. Some people do, I'm not a big fan of it. I believe it comes through throwing and strengthening. I need to strengthen internal. I start strengthening internal or strengthening external or or strengthening all the other ones, so this would be rotator cuff and then strengthening traps and serratus, then that joint should open up, okay? So be very careful though with the shoulder joint. That's why I don't like the sleeper stretch. You can get very aggressive in, that shoulder needs to basically adapt on its own based on the loads it's thrown. I would rather see you strengthening than stretching to get to that. So let's try to get to that healthy range. Now, arm path, that would be hard on labrum. Just like I said, it wouldn't be more arm path, it would be more trunk. If I don't get good trunk tilts going forward, okay, and I'm more vertical, then that arm at release is going to be more farther out in front of my face, which is going to take me more into internal rotation. If my trunk is forward, okay, I'm going to release more above my head, behind my head, kind of, and then when I get into internal rotation, it's not going to be as aggressive because my trunk's up. I mean, just look at it here. This is 0 degrees, but if I start leaning back, now I'm into internal. If I start going forward, I'm going into external. So the more the trunk is forward, the less I'll be forced into internal rotation. And the trunk movements are all based on the lower half, so it's something that has to be developed in the lower half. Other thing with the labrum, if I'm in arm drag, what's called hyperangulation, if I go into shoulder rotation, I have early trunk rotation, and the elbow gets behind the back, then what's going to happen is I'm going to put all this stress in the front of the cuff, and that could cause a labrum tear up front, an anterior tear. So any too much horizontal abduction movement could be hard. It's going to be hard on the labrum, and any limited or whatever limits are on internal or how much your mechanics are forcing you internal is going to be hard on the labrum. So basically, what you're trying to do when you get into joint damage is you're trying to avoid end of range. Okay, this is end of range. This is end of range. So we've got to avoid that biomechanically, and then we have to be strong enough to prevent the arm being forced into internal rotation without those muscles kind of decelerating it into that end of range. Go into end of range at slower speeds as opposed to not having the strength to decelerate and it's slamming it into end of range. Okay, that's the way we're going to protect it. So if you're that guy, you got to go, okay, am I strong enough to have a good full range, and can I decelerate the forces quick enough so I don't slam into end of range, and do my mechanics prevent that from happening? I think you'd knock out a labrum tear.
Yeah, I was also going to say too on the Kibler and Chandler study on pretty much just on lower half power. What is it? It's like there's a decrease in
20% decrease in the kinetic energy delivered from the hip and trunk to the arm requires a 34% increase in the rotational velocity of the shoulder to keep the same force in the hand.
Yep, so that's the power aspect of it, that if you're not having enough power in the lower half, you're going to overcompensate with the arm. And then also I was reading a study that I was showing you on the hip mobility of external rotation and internal rotation. If you're lacking there, it's going to cause you to maintain the same amount of power. It's going to cause you to get more thoracic extension, more thoracic rotation, get you more rotational, and then more external rotation to be able to produce the same force.
Yeah, so you're trying to force your arm into bigger ranges and doing more of the work, which, think about it, the arm's having to force into internal, then it's not doing as good of a job decelerating into internal. Then you're slamming to end of range with a lot of speeds as opposed to decelerating into end of range.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just looking at power and mobility in the lower half, that can be big too.
Yeah, so the lower half is your potential energy. If we can get more energy through the body, which is kinetic energy, to the arm, then the arm can be along more for the ride and do more of the work of decelerating forces as opposed to accelerating forces, which will be healthier on protecting it from slamming into end of range, which is where labrum tears happen. Sorry, complicated answer there, guys. So you might want to watch this a few times, but I think that right there in that segment, you really got everything you need to know to stay injury-free in your shoulder. Didn't go into the elbow. We weren't talking about that. Everything we gave you there should keep you injury-free in that shoulder. Okay. Next question. Logan Dunlap asked, please take a look at this clip. Is a weak force vector prevent him from reaching 3x? There's no poor force vector there. His force vector gets very linear. He tilts back into that position. I would say, there's triple extension almost there. It's close, but there's not a lot of force behind it. So I would say, it's not that he's not triple extending, there's just not a lot of force production through that triple extension. there's not a lot of linear force slamming him in the front foot, catapulting his trunk forward. He's kind of having to overcompensate in the end, lack of force hitting the front leg. So he does a great job of like overemphasizing force vector, but it more or less kind of just collapses and falls in the front foot. And when he hits front foot, he's still way back here. So then he tries to pull himself around. Not that efficient. What we want is, you know, he can do what he's doing now to get that force vector linear. Don't lose torsion. Keep the knees out. Don't lose torsion. He is losing a little torsion. But force production, we need more force out of the back leg. And that's athleticism. I don't think he has the explosive athleticism in his lower half to really get force hitting his front leg, because what we would see is him hitting front foot and the trunk getting more vertical and separated at that point. It's still way back here where he was when he started. If there was force driving him, that would have popped up to transfer into front foot as front foot broke and then his trunk slammed and catapulted forward. So I like the force vector. Definitely better on torsion. Definitely better on force production out of 3X to get everything catapulting, slamming in the front foot. What would you say?
Yeah, I just thought the hip rotation came late, and as the hip rotation came, his shoulders came too, so he lost the hip to shoulder separation. So that comes from just more force production out of the back leg. So if he could get it to where, like Brent's saying, he's hitting at front foot strike and peaking really good and getting those hips to slam and everything staying loaded back, he's going to get more hip to shoulder separation and it'll be better. But other than that, I think it looks good. He just needs more power coming through.
I mean, actually, I would say you have great hip to shoulder separation. But
right there,
see how vertical his front leg, your front leg is vertical. So it's like, he's doing such a good job holding his weight back and counter rotating, and he's mobile enough to where when he does extend, the hip gets through. It's just, that's it. I don't see really potential energy. I don't see all this energy built up then exploding him forward.
It's the front leg then?
No, it's not force. It's not force production hitting front leg. It's more falling and timing extension. And everything separates, but there's no energy. It's just a lack of energy through that movement. Yeah. It's just a poor lack of energy coming out of the lower half. Hitting the positions correctly, being able to over-exaggerate and hit separation correctly. But there's then nothing, at the point of front foot strike and hip shoulder separation, it can no longer be positions at that point. It has to be ballistics. It has to be athleticism. It has to be, once you hit that, it's like, then everything explodes, boom! So if you're not seeing good trunk tilts, you know, good front leg extension, you know, good, internal rotation or external internal rotation, if you're not seeing all that really explode out, then that's just a poor lack of energy. I think you've done everything positional, just the athleticism isn't there at that moment to then explode everything forward. No? Does that make sense?
No, I agree with that.
Because that's what we got to be careful. We can mimic these movements with poor athleticism, but we're not going to get the end result. We're not going to get the ball speed. You know, we can turn this into choreography and hit these positions and throw 80. My whole example of Lance Limpert, the guy who won the Red Bull contest because he pitched just like Tim Lincecum. He looked just like Tim Lincecum, but if you slowed it down, he was missing all the movements by milliseconds. He choreographed the positions perfectly and threw 80. You know, same size as Tim Lincecum, but never got to 95 because the athleticism wasn't in there. And what do we know about Tim Lincecum? We've talked about this. We know Tim Lincecum then could do a backflip. You know, had Barry Zito tell me how Tim Lincecum could lift himself off the ground with his hands, tuck his feet under his butt, and go into a backwards handstand. That's insane mobility. That's insane joint integrity. You know, we also know that he could ace the speed and agility testings in spring training. Mm-hmm. So Lance Limpert, in that little case study I've thrown out, he could mimic the positions and the movements, but he was missing the speeds, the milliseconds it took to power through those movements to release the energy. So just don't forget, positions are important, but if there's an energy moving through those positions, we fail to get where we're going. Good question. If you have a question, go to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, at Top Velocity, hashtag pitch tips, hashtag baseball tips. That's your question answer the show. Come down to 2X3X camps, getting ready for the summer. Unfortunately, it's going to get hot down here. So if you come down, hydrate, bring about 2-3 pairs of clothes, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Cheers.